I am James Browning, and I'm professor of religion at UPike. So I don't know what else that you want to know about me, but other things about me is I'm Dr. James Browning. I'm Reverend James Browning. I prefer to go by James. Uh, my wife's name is Carol Grizzard. She retired from teaching here at UPike, where she taught for 23 years. Actually, she taught at Pikeville College. I enjoy hiking. I enjoy nature very much and like to be in nature. I drink coffee. One of the chief joys of life is good coffee. Uh, there's so much about a person, it's hard to summarize it. There's a start.
So you've been here at the institution how long?
This is the start of my 16th year at Pikeville College / UPike.
Wow, 16 years. So I suspect James, as a kid, probably did not introduce yourself in saying, I'm going to be a professor of religion at a small liberal arts school in eastern Kentucky. As a kid, what did you want to do?
Well, and by the way, when I first got the job listing for this job, I had never heard of Pikeville College before, so you're right. I had no idea that I would live here, which, by the way, this is a wonderful place to live. I've thoroughly enjoyed living here. People are great, mountains are great, the atmosphere here at UPike is great, so I thoroughly enjoyed living here. But when I was growing up in southwest Arkansas, I don't know when I was a child that I had any strong sense of I'm growing up to be a blank. In my era, back in the early Bronze Age when I was in school, the two things that often people were pressured to become, like social expectation, if you do really good in school, you're either going to be a doctor or an engineer. So I think physician, engineer were the two things that I was pushed toward by social expectation, because we had a good science program in my high school, and I loved physics, and I loved the biology class that we had, enjoyed chemistry, enjoyed science a great deal. So everybody thought I would go in that direction. So when I became a religion major in college, that caused a great deal of discussion and surprise. In fact, my aunt, who I'm very close to, was actually angry at me for choosing a different road in life. So what I'm going to say is that your sense of who you're going to become develops over time, and the present day James likes to say, I am a human becoming rather than a human being, because that seems like it's too solid and doesn't account for the change and development and growth that goes on throughout your life. There's a Taoist parable that says life is a series of changes. You can adapt or suffer. So I think a part of any sense of healthy calling or vocation is the ability to adapt. Or there's a Southern expression that says bloom where you're planted, which doesn't mean put up with oppressive conditions, but it means that you may end up where you didn't expect because of your limited set of expectations or hopes, and turn out that it's a pretty good place. Right.
So when we think about a dream job, obviously, you're becoming and you're growing and you're developing. Is there a dream job for you?
Well, I'm going to answer that in two ways. Number one is, I hope I never get my dream job, because my own sense of expectations and hopes and dreams is very limited. Right. So I think for many of us, it's probably good that we never got the job that we, like in our heads, thought we were going to get, because it would be pretty sterile. Life is messy, and every job that you take on has its messy elements. But another answer is, this is my dream job. A common theme throughout my entire life is I wanted to teach. So I'm teaching, so that's my dream job. My mother was a teacher. She taught elementary school reading and English. My aunt was a teacher. She taught journalism in high school. Probably the two most influential people in my life in terms of my own sense of vocation. And because both of them were teachers, I think that shaped me early on to want to be a teacher. There's a teaching element to every job I've ever had, but in terms of this being a teaching college, this is perfect, right? Not to say that everything is perfect, but this is the perfect setting in the sense of being a complete whole. This is what I wanted to do. Yes, this is it.
So was there anything that happened in your life to spur you onto this path? I mean, I know you took this surprising major, kind of shocked the family with religion, but was there something that spurred you onto this path?
Several things. There's a pastor in my church growing up, George Ballantyne, who had a PhD in New Testament and actually left the church that I grew up in to go teach at a Baptist college. So having him as a kind of role model was very important. Faith was very important to me and my upbringing. And I've always had a strong sense of interest about the world around me. And while some people think that religion is about being closed-minded, it's exactly the opposite. I mean, the human religious experience is so varied and diverse, and you get to ask all sorts of questions that are big questions about life. I think that the area of religion was attractive to me because it combines the head with the heart, and both of those things define me. I didn't want to go into a profession that was only head. I wanted to help people, to actually make an impact. And it seemed like that while the other two vocations that everybody thought I was going to go into would have helped people and had an impact, there was something, there's not a word for it. It's like the modern day phraseology is follow your passion. That doesn't really get at it. There's a religious kind of vernacular about calling that doesn't really get at it. Something deep inside of me was telling me that this is the route I needed to take. So the route I needed to take was to be a religion major and to look at the field of religion as an opportunity, but I didn't have any stronger sense of like a specific job I wanted at that moment. I ended up picking up a journalism major because I enjoy writing so much and wanted to develop that. So I can't point to one particular place or thing or person that was a dramatic impact on me. I think my life is unfolded. It's more of a mosaic, right? Lots of little things add up to a big thing. So lots of little influences. I'm sure that many of the people that were involved in our church at home had an impact on me by their lives and the way that they carried themselves. But I can't think of any one like big dramatic moment that caused me to go in this direction. And I continue to do that. I mean, I try to combine thinking about what I need to be doing with my life with listening to, for lack of a better word, my heart, because otherwise we become imbalanced.
I know it's so hard to put a life in a sentence or two, like
Yeah.
the easy answered bumper sticker kind of stuff. But when you think about your own call,
Yeah.
if you had to summarize in a sentence, how would you do that?
By the way, okay, I'm not going to answer your question at first here because you reminded me of a story. I used to have a motto when I taught theology classes that if your theology fits on a bumper sticker, I don't want to hear about it. And so one of my enterprising students made me a bumper sticker that said, if your theology fits on a bumper sticker, I don't want to hear about it. And I said, you realize that now my theology fits on a bumper sticker, so here I am. So that's the problem about all catchphrases, right? In 2 Corinthians 5, there's a phrase from Paul, ministry of reconciliation. And when I was in high school, the big thing was to find a life verse. So that was a big deal in youth ministry of the time. And that became my life verse, a ministry of reconciliation. And if I could summarize that, I've always wanted, since reconciliation is a process of healing relationships and putting back together things that are broken or alienated from one another, it seems that everywhere I've gone, what I've done has had that kind of component, whether it was doing interfaith work and helping different religions understand each other, or whether it was being a pastor, right, or whether it was being a prof in a seminary setting or an undergraduate setting. There's always that element of healing and putting pieces together. In the college setting, it's helping students put the pieces of their own life together and move in a positive direction. That's very satisfying when you see your students succeed and they're actually headed somewhere with themselves. That's wonderful. So, a ministry of reconciliation. How's that for a tagline?
So would you say that your job or your call now, I mean, your job aligns with this call?
Okay, yes. And it's I like the way you put it, because calling to me is global and job is specific. So I think maybe mature me, looking back at the decision I made in high school going into college to follow the social expectation of the time, was pressure to take a certain job. But for me, a job was not enough without a bigger sense of what we might call calling. That is, what is my vocation? What am I supposed to be doing? And that global sense came from this idea of ministry of reconciliation. And the field of religion, very naturally, is a place where one would think about going to do that. So I think that all the religious jobs that I've held have fulfilled that sense of vocation, and certainly this one does.
You already mentioned the role of your mom as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the role of the pastor, who was this pastor scholar.
Right.
But who's been most influential in helping you discover or lean into your call?
Okay. So I think in every phase of my life, I've been fortunate to have mentors. So my aunt and my mother, interestingly, the science professor that I had in high school was important. She's very formative because she's very professional, related to students well, encouraged curiosity. In college, Dr. Bill Elder, who was one of my religion professors, straight out of grad school, just gave us exactly what he'd been getting in grad school, didn't water it down, was very challenging, very personable. So that was college. In seminary, Dr. Newport, who was the provost there, but he also taught theology classes and classes in other religions, and was actually one of his classes in religious minorities in America that sparked me to put some things together, which was, I'm going to go to Baylor, I'm going to study comparative religion. And then during my doctoral work, my major professor, Dr. Breckenridge, a very unassuming man, who was quite brilliant, very disciplined, and then the theology professor for whom I was a teaching assistant, graduate assistant, Wally Christian, who was a major personality that you could write a novel about. He was also a good role model for me, because while he appeared to be very demanding, because he wanted you to bring excellence, he was also very compassionate. So I'll tell you a story about Dr. Christian. So Dr. Christian would, during finals, because he taught both graduate and undergraduate classes, and I would help him with the undergraduate classes, he would put a sign on his door that said, "This door is charged with 50,000 volts of electricity. Don't even think about knocking." And he was very imperious, like the legendary somebody straight out of Harry Potter kind of professor. So, and people were scared of him, and I think he sort of liked that. And at the same time, I came in to take one of his exams in a graduate class, and it was one of those things where I'd studied, but when I looked at the one essay question on the test, I couldn't do it. part of it was going blank, and part of it was I didn't study right. And so I went to the bathroom and threw up. And then I gathered myself and took my paper and went down to Dr. Christian's office because he had a proctor there. And I just said, I don't know what to do. If I take this test, I'm going to fail it. So what do I do? And he pulled out his calendar and said, when do you want to take a makeup? And smiled at me and said, okay. He said, happens to all of us. And so we scheduled a makeup test. He said, I'll give you a different test, that's fine. And then when I came back to take it, it was the same test because he wasn't messing with me, right? He wanted me to study again. So that very compassion, he didn't have to do that. He could have given me an F. So I learned from him this combination of, I don't want to be as imperious as he was, but I learned this combination of demanding excellence, but at the same time being compassionate. And I think, in fact, if I think carefully, all those academics that I mentioned combined those qualities. Then when I worked as an interfaith consultant for a denominational agency, Maurice Smith, who was a veteran who was on his way for retirement, kind of took me under his wing and was my mentor. Maurice was a very kind person who had been a missionary in Ghana and then had gone on to get a PhD in comparative religion and was quite an expert. He taught me the discipline of how to actually field study religions, not textbook study, but actually talk to people and relate to people. So he was a mentor. And then when I switched from that to being pastor in Kansas City, in the church, a man who's still alive by the name of Jim Wood, who was an older friend. He was a retired mechanic from TWA, very well read, has a big white beard that we figured out is older than me, looks like Santa Claus, very wise, gentle person, always up at the church, always volunteering, very gentle soul. He sort of befriended me and became a good role model too. Jim's the person that figured out how our church could have a labyrinth. Have I told you this story? Okay, so a labyrinth is a spiritual discipline. And we looked at various ways, all expensive, like you can buy a labyrinth in a bucket and roll it out. You can have one painted on the floor, requires a huge space. He did some research and figured out you could have one in the grass. And so he got the pattern for it and mowed a labyrinth in the grass. It just involves mowing such that it creates a pathway. And he did a small version of the Chart-style labyrinth that goes to the center and taught other people how to do it. It's still at Inglewood, even though he doesn't, he's moved in his retirement somewhere else, but it's still there. So I learned from Jim, he had a real knack of solving practical problems and helping people while he was doing it. So we couldn't figure out how to have a labyrinth we could afford, and he solved the problem. He did some study and got out there and mowed one into the grass. So I've never seen one like it anywhere else.
So if someone were watching you and listening to you today and they said, I want to be a professor of religion, what did you do to align yourself to get on that path? Okay.
To be on that path requires a certain kind of education. So you don't have to major in religion in college. It helps, but it's not essential. I chose to do my master's work at a seminary because I wanted what I did to always have a connection to local church or to faith-based not-for-profits. And then when I went to do my PhD work, of course you have to pick a specialty, but one of the reasons I chose Baylor is they had this philosophy that if you're going to be a religion professor, probably it'll be at a small college and you'll probably have to teach a lot of things. So they didn't want us to over-specialize. So while my specialty is comparative religion, world religions, I minored in Old Testament, I minored in theology, I had an outside minor in philosophy, and so part of this is proper education, but I think aligning yourself so that you can do the maximum number of things. Very few people follow the textbook linear path through a vocation. Less and less people than ever. So the more things that you can take that give you a wider based experience, even as an undergraduate, I would say to people, take all the trips you can take, get a minor, get a double major like I did. Religion and journalism don't seem to go together, but I've had to write a great deal throughout my life and had to edit a lot too. I think that you should have as many experiences as you can have and as many competencies and areas of interest as you can have, because you simply do not know what opportunity is going to present itself in the future. For example, I became an adjunct professor shortly after I became a pastor because the seminary that I first taught at as an adjunct had an arrangement with the local college that the philosophy of religion course would be taught by their philosophy prof. That person left. A new person came in and said, I don't want to do this. No, I'm not teaching at a seminary. So 2 weeks before school started, they discovered they had no one to teach their philosophy of religion class. And because I have a minor in philosophy, they called me up and said, would you be willing to take this class on? That was my big break into teaching on a college or seminary level. And it was my minor that got me the job, not my major. So I would say to people, get as many experiences, because you do not know what opportunities will present themselves. And don't just confine yourself. If you're seeking a career in religion, you need to study other things. I mean, you need to study psychology, you need to study sociology, you need to study history. A little archaeology wouldn't hurt. There's so many things that you should be. An English degree would help you because you spend a lot of your time reading text, studying ancient text. So I'm a big fan of being interdisciplinary. And by the way, my early interest in science, you know that my big interest right now is religion and science. And I've formed partnerships with science professors here at UPike to do religion and science projects and courses. So that early interest in high school in science wasn't wasted. I just didn't know back then that 50-year-old me would need that.
This beautiful, almost full circle in some ways, story has not been a straight path as much as maybe someone looks at. There's been ups and downs, difficulties, and
Yes.
great challenges. And how have you managed to navigate all of these life obstacles, painful moments, to stay focused on that which you felt like was for you?
Well, I mean, one important part is I've always been in a community of people that were supportive, whether it was my cadre of friends in grad school, or whether it was the church community at Inglewood, or whether it's my community of friends here at UPike. I've always been in community. And to me, that's crucial. It doesn't have to be a traditional kind of community, but to always be in some kind of community in which people can help one another when they need the help has been crucial. You and I have talked about this, why some people are able to recover from trauma and persevere and others do not. And I don't know the answer to that. But there is also developing a sense of inward focus. So my practice of meditation has helped me a great deal throughout my life. When I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, that was a big blow to me. I had rapid onset, and after the first 3 months, it spiked so much that I almost couldn't move my hands. So here I was, how am I going to prepare like a sermon manuscript? Because I was taught to write out a manuscript. I couldn't hold a pen well enough to write legibly. I couldn't type because my hands were So interestingly, what happened was people were so very supportive. A member of my congregation said, if you want, I will come up to the church and sit at the keyboard and you can talk and I'll type it. I actually never took her up on that, but it was such an astounding act of generosity that it came to my mind, well, I'll just have to prepare my sermons differently, right? This is an opportunity to do something new. So I prepared them in my head, like I could write out a few key words and I just study like I always did and think about it. And what I discovered was it changed my style, obviously. And then people began responding positively to my sermons that never said a word to me before, right? So I think that there is, in overcoming difficulties, is an internal adjustment that you have to make. That I said to myself, I will not allow rheumatoid arthritis to define who I am. It's a part of me. I have to face it. I have to deal with it. I have to adjust to it. But I will continue to do the things I want to do. And if my body tells me I can't, then I'll adjust. But I'll seize this as an opportunity to develop new interest or find things that I can do instead. So my rheumatoid arthritis kept me from being able to play tennis. It kept me from running. So instead of running, I started walking with highly cushioned shoes, right? I continued hiking, but I had to go shorter hikes since I couldn't do tennis. And since softball was difficult for me, like I'd always done, I took up Tai Chi, which is non-impact. So sometimes you just have to flow to a new set of possibilities if you find that there's a large boulder or mountain in your way and flow around it. There's no magic answer to your question. But I think community and the willingness to persevere and find new ways, create new opportunities, instead of thinking of yourself as blocked.
In all of your years as pastoral ministry, interfaith consultant, professor, you've dealt with a lot of people in moments of great need, but also in great confusion, right?
Right.
So when they come in and they say, Dr. Browning, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with my life, what advice would you have for them?
Okay. And first of all, people rarely say that. They rarely say that in such a global way. But they'll give you clues that they're searching by the smaller thing that they're looking for. Like, I have no idea what classes I want to take or what's going to be my major. I used to be assigned undecideds. And I actually took great joy in that because I would say, I would have a conversation. What do you like? What are you interested in? Let's try these things. Let's use your gen ed courses and take good, interesting ones. See, you might like something you don't know you like. So I would say the answer to that kind of question would be an ongoing dialogue about helping people to reflect and discern, which that's built on a relationship. So I guess what I'm going to say to you is what I wouldn't do is give some snappy answer or a magical phrase or two-part technique. Life doesn't work that way. What I try to get people to do is open up, think about themselves, do a little self-examination, try to get past what their mom and dad and their culture told them that they were supposed to do, and try to find that sense of what is it that I find meaningful and engaging. What would I still enjoy doing 30 years from now, right? So I think I would try to engage them in a process of discernment that would be relational, that would go over time. I don't think I could ever directly answer that question. What am I going to do with my life? That's such a deeply personal question. I would try to be a mentor that would help them search that out